Section 1. Origins of a Doctrine, Defining the Hemisphere. In 1823, President James Monroe declared a bold vision for the United States in the Western Hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine proclaimed a simple message. European powers were to cease any further colonization or interference in the Americas. This marked a turning point, signaling the United States' sphere of influence. The doctrine was born from idealism and pragmatism. The U.S. sought to protect its interests while championing democracies in Latin America. European empires aimed to exploit these newly independent nations. The U.S., having fought for its freedom, recognized the threat. The doctrine laid the groundwork for future U.S. interventionism. It contained the seeds of future complexities and moral dilemmas. Section 2. Manifest Destiny and Interventionism, Early Echoes of the Doctrine. The decades following the Monroe Doctrine saw rapid westward expansion, driven by manifest destiny. This belief in a divine right to control the continent led to the displacement of countless Native American tribes. Originally to protect the Americas from European colonialism, the doctrine now justified U.S. imperial ambitions. The Spanish-American War of 1898 exemplified the evolving interpretation of the Monroe Doctrine. Citing humanitarian concerns, the U.S. intervened in the Cuban War of Independence. Victory against Spain cemented the U.S. as a rising world power, increasing interventionism in Latin America. The war marked a turning point, showing a willingness to use military force in the region. Throughout the early 20th century, the U.S. asserted dominance in the Western Hemisphere, invoking the Monroe Doctrine. From Nicaragua to Panama, U.S. influence often came at the expense of local populations and their self-determination. Section 3. The Cold War, a Global Chessboard, and the Monroe Doctrine's Evolution. The Cold War ushered in a new era of global rivalry, with the United States and the Soviet Union vying for ideological and geopolitical dominance. The Monroe Doctrine, once confined to the Western Hemisphere, unfortunately took on a global dimension. The United States, viewing the spread of communism as a direct threat to its national security, adopted a policy of containment, seeking to prevent the spread of Soviet influence across the globe. This globalized misinterpretation of the Monroe Doctrine led to U.S. involvement in conflicts far beyond its traditional sphere of influence. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, and numerous proxy wars in Africa, Asia, and Latin America were all framed as necessary interventions to prevent the domino effect of communist expansion. The United States poured billions of dollars into military spending, establishing bases and alliances around the world, all in the name of containing the perceived Soviet threat. But now we spend more on defending these other countries than they do on their own defense. The Cold War marked a significant departure from the original intent of the Monroe Doctrine. What began as a declaration to protect the Americas from European colonialism had transformed into a justification for global military interventionism. The lines between national security and ideological crusades became increasingly blurred, often with devastating consequences for those caught in the crossfire. Section 4. Post-Cold War Interventions, from humanitarian aid to regime change. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 signaled the end of the Cold War, but it did not usher in an era of peace and stability as many had hoped. The United States, now the sole superpower, faced a new set of challenges and opportunities. The absence of a clear ideological adversary led to a reevaluation of its foreign policy objectives, but the impulse for interventionism remained strong. The post-Cold War era witnessed a shift in the rhetoric surrounding U.S. interventions, and a major uptick in military spending around the world. While national security remained a primary concern, humanitarian interventions, promoting democracy, and combating terrorism became increasingly prominent justifications for military action. From Somalia to the Balkans, Afghanistan to Iraq, the United States engaged in a series of interventions, often with hellish results and dire consequences. The debate over the legitimacy and effectiveness of U.S. interventions in the post-Cold War era remains a contentious one. Supporters falsely argue that the United States has a moral obligation to intervene in cases of genocide, human rights abuses, and threats to international security. Critics, however, point to the often disastrous consequences of these interventions, citing civilian casualties, destabilization of entire regions, and the fueling of resentment and anti-American sentiment. We must remember the original reason for the Monroe Doctrine. If it didn't happen here and doesn't directly affect us, it is not our problem, and we should not be the ones dealing with it.